Pritchard family and the Bollinger family would like to thank each of you for coming to join in the celebration of their father's life, Howard Pritchard. It means a lot to them that you are here. You are a part of Howard's life, and he will be glad you are here too. There have been many tears shed, and there will be many more shed in the future, but the family would like today to be one of happy memories, stories that Howard made happen. Every one of us has our own special memories of Howard, and the family would like each of you to share these today. A man in full. Howard Pritchard was a man in full. As I look around the room, almost everyone in this room has had the good fortune to be a part of Natchez and its rich past and continuing history. But very few of us have had the great fortune to be the ultimate insider and also a dedicated and stubborn outsider. Howard Pritchard chose that course. You could say that Howard was born a Natchez blue blood with Mississippi River blood in his soul. Having been born into one of the oldest families in Natchez, Howard, as a boy, was welcome walking in the back door of Stanton Hall and then getting out of there as fast as he could to go play on the banks of the Mississippi River, his great love. Howard was comfortable with the powerful of Natchez, whom he loved to skewer with relish at every opportunity. It's true. But he was really in his world, with as many friends under the hill, like Joe Ramundi, Steve Stevens, as well as Andre Farish, George Guido, Johnny Ogden, Lucius Butts, Neville Marshall, Bill Slater, and a host of others that I can't think of off the top of my head. Howard kept his beloved boats tied to Steve's makeshift barge under the hill with its walkway made of old boards, oil drums, and cables. How it stayed afloat and tied to the willow trees along the bank, we'll never understand. Howard would grab Joe and Steve and any other handy river rat and head out for a day on the river. A bunch of overgrown Huck Finns, just glad to be alive. Howard was always alive. Very, very alive. You could also count on a big fish fry, river blue cats, when they got back. Life was good for Howard and his many friends. Howard made sure of that. Howard shared. You could see Howard walking in the unlocked back door to the president's office of Citibank and Trust Company. Ethel would shout, "Leslie, Howard's here." That was the intercom of the day. And Leslie Carpenter would shout, "Well, tell him to come on back." Of course, by that time, Howard was already sitting down in front of the desk. 5 minutes later, a financial transaction would be struck on a handshake, and paperwork might or might not be done later. These were men of character, along with many others of their day, and they knew each other, and they knew they were good for their word. Again, Howard shared. Few people know of all the many quiet kindnesses that Howard made happen. If a man needed a handy job to feed his kids, Howard seemed to find one for him. If someone was behind on a rent, well, somehow it just got taken care of. If a kid needed a little help getting through school, Howard had a way of making that happen, most of the time without them ever knowing who or how. Howard shared, and Howard cared. Howard was a protector, and he could be fierce. He could intimidate when he needed to. Just try being one of the young men trying to get anywhere near one of his two daughters. Hell, I'm surprised either one of those girls ever had a date before they were 25 years old. My first real memories of Howard was going to pick up Elodie at her house on Linton Street to take her to the King's Ball. It was about dusk, but Howard was in the yard watering the lawn. He didn't speak to me when I walked by. When Elodie and I came back down the sidewalk, long dress, tux, she looked awesome. Howard casually turned the water hose on us and made his feelings clearly known. "That is my daughter, son, and you watch it, boy." It was clear. Howard Pritchard was not a man to be crossed. Howard would do whatever it took to protect whatever he loved most, his family. A few years later, on a hot, steamy summer day, a bunch of us were over at the Pritchard's place on Old River. I wasn't sure Howard was very pleased to have me there. After a while, Howard said he needed a little help with a fish trap out in the river and asked me to go out there and check it. It was about 100 feet off the bank and about 4 feet of muddy water. I wasn't crazy about the idea, but it wasn't a request. It was more a statement. It was a test, and we both knew it. Howard wanted to know what kind of a man you were. Howard already knew what kind of a man he was. So out I went, deeper and deeper, over my waist. I got to the fish trap. I got a grip on the big homemade fish trap and lifted it up out of the water, eye level. I was face to face with the biggest snake on the entire Mississippi River. Howard knew it was there. I flunked the hell out of that test. You might say Howard and I got off to a little rocky start. But you know, the truth was, he only wanted to know that you would go out there. That was good enough for him. Howard loved and pursued life with a passion, a fierce passion. Howard was fit, and he made sure he stayed that way because that gave him the physical presence to pursue all of his life's many adventures. Most men in their 60s, 70s, or even 80s are taking it easy, winding down, looking for a rocking chair. Not Howard. You were likely to find him on his side porch, drenched in sweat, on his Olympic weightlifting bench, pressing more weights than a man in his 20s. Howard hated old age, and he fought it. He fought it fiercely, and he fought it courageously. No man will ever win that fight, and Howard knew that, but it didn't matter. That did not keep him from fighting it at every turn until the very end, and he damn near won. After all, Howard Pritchard was a man in full. Thank you. Guys, the family would like each of you to come up, tell what you remember of Howard. This is very informal. The family asked for it that way. So please do.
Can I go first? Well, I guess Howard's in heaven now. Randy Laird told me the other day that whenever a man dies, a library burns down. And that's why I've asked all my friends here today to tell stories that they know about Daddy so that library doesn't burn down. And I'll try not to do this much. But he had some good ones. And I want to keep these for posterity. So I went through a bunch of old stuff and I found some things that he'd written as a teenager that just completely, thank you, just blew my mind. I posted one on the blog the other day, so some of you have seen it, but some of you haven't. You got a B- on this one. It was for English class. And it's called The Shanty Boater. There are many picturesque phases of American life which basically have not been altered by the advance of progress during the last century. Among these is the life of a shanty boater along the banks of the mighty Mississippi River. This broad, muddy, twisting stream has long been the theme for innumerable poems and songs which still reflect the color and adventure of the antebellum steamboat days. To me, the Old Man River has always seemed a living thing, for among my first recollections are those of staring from the steep bluffs of Natchez out over the river and into the green haze of the Louisiana lowlands beyond. Consequently, as a growing boy, many of my summer days were spent rowing for miles along the willow-covered banks, stripped to the waist, reveling in the calm and peaceful freedom which the river seemed to express. Living along the banks of the Mississippi, usually within several miles of a town, are the staunch and sturdy shanty boaters, a tribe unto themselves. Their homes consist of shanties or shacks built on small barges approximately 15 by 30 feet, and are usually moored in some sheltered cove or eddy, safe from the wind and current. Invariably, these humble dwellings are guarded by 2 or 3 hoarse-voiced mongrels whose sole responsibility in life is to serenade any boat or stranger who approaches near enough to arouse canine suspicion. The average male shantyboater might well have stepped from the pages of a Stevenson pirate novel as far as appearances are concerned. Tanned to the texture of leather, grizzled whiskers, squinting eyes, tobacco-stained teeth, and muscular physique, this child of nature presents a startling picture. His sole means of support is matching his wits against those of the catfish, buffalo, garfish, and turtles which infest the Mississippi, for every riverman has a strong aversion to any type of confining work. In the spring of other seasons, when the fish are running plentiful and silver begins to jingle in the tattered pockets of the shantyboater, his greatest pleasure is to have a wild fling in some river saloon, where soon the wine, women, and jukebox music have separated him from his hard-earned savings. Then he returns to his boat, drunk, tired, a little rueful, but happy in the knowledge that here on the river he is free from the bonds and responsibilities of modern civilization. Now, he got a B- on that paper. But you want to know what his teacher said at the bottom? You're talking me into this as a profession. The other one, if any of y'all have ever been out to his house, it's going to blow you away. He wrote this when he was about 1943. He was born in 1926. What does that make? 16? He got a G+ on this one. If I could build my own house. If suddenly I was to be given a large amount of money, providing I built a house with it, there would be no hesitation in my mind as to the type of dwelling to construct. First, I would select a suitable site for my project. To me, the most preferable spot for a comfortable dwelling would be on the top of a high hill overlooking a vast body of water in the wildest and thickest forest of the country. The nearby water and woods would be well stocked with game, of course. As to the actual structure of the house, I would model my home after any one of several antebellum mansions near Natchez. There would be tall stone columns in front and a wide veranda encircling the whole house. The building would consist of a basement and 3 upper floors, and down the center of each story would be a spacious hallway running to the rear of the house. On the ground floor there would be a dining room, a well-equipped library, and several large adjoining parlors. On the second floor would be my living quarters and several bedrooms to spare. On the uppermost floor, I would have one half of the house made into a large recreational gymnasium, equipped with all forms of indoor games. And actually, this one bedroom upstairs that was originally supposed to be that gymnasium, and things changed, and he couldn't do that anymore, but that's what it would have been. The other half of the floor would be used as an attic or storeroom, where I would keep my guns and other hunting equipment. Here also would be my workshop, furnished with electricity by a gasoline-driven generator in the basement. We would have all died of carbon monoxide poisoning. My idea of a perfect home is somewhat fantastic, but as you know, this plan was written on the foundation of every dreamer's pet word, if. I don't know. I brought a bunch of drawings that y'all can't really see, so I'm going to kind of skip over those. I'll let you see them when we get home. My father was an artist without compare. He could draw anything. He's amazing. And I also brought a few things that he wrote about his friends, so some of you are going to have a little fun with this. And also, I found this. This is a holiday greeting to my dad by Western Union from Santa Claus. Christmas greetings from the North Pole. Have you been good this year? Just wanted to let you know that I'm on my way, so go to bed early and go to sleep. I'm coming with plenty of pretties for good little boys who will be at your house. Santa Claus. And apparently he went to camp in Arkansas. And whenever he wrote a letter, if it was a postcard, he wrote, Dear Mother and Daddy. But if it was an enclosed letter, he wrote, Dear Mubber. M-U-B-B-E-R. I guess he got teased from Mubber. Dear Mubber, Tippy just cut his foot today and it bled a lot. Remember that time I got lost in the bayou? Well, I left a metal sword hidden under some slabs of stone. Today, Lucius, Loff and Junior got it for me. They didn't get lost and they got back quickly. Daddy says I couldn't possibly get lost down there if I just followed the railroad. I want to know if I can go down there again. Let me know in your next letter. I hope you are having a good time. Give Sister and Malcolm my love. Love, Howard. P.S. Tippy sends his love. And it's a little picture of a dog with little hearts. Loff and Lucius, thank you for finding his sword. I think he really appreciated it. Let me see. There's a few of them here. I won't read them all, but some of them are kind of funny. Okay. Probably shouldn't read this one in here, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is a letter to the editor of the Clarion Ledger. 311 East Pearl Street, Jackson, Mississippi, 39201. Dear Sir, having seen the vast array of centuries of accumulated wealth on display in the Vatican, and being acutely aware of the ever-increasing media pleas for aid to the poor, destitute, and starving peoples in underprivileged lands, it would seem that a donation of a portion of that wealth would effect a great service to humanity. It would also seem appropriate that this should come from a source which has for many generations adhered to a policy largely responsible for the present state of affairs in many areas: overpopulation. Sincerely, Howard Purdue. Oh, God. Let me see. This one is a little, I guess y'all had a club. It was the Chief, Howard. The Eagle Warriors, and there was a flag, and it's Howard, Billy, Charles, Lucius, Loff, Kenny, and then Kenny and Tommy, and it's got little arrows that says the two masked spies. Edwin, Edna, Marie, Fred, Jimmy, with a little arrow that says half man. 12 men. Beware of the two masked spies. Y'all had fun, I can tell. This is a little pirate map, and I'll let y'all see these when you get home, some hidden treasures and stuff like that. This is the sweetest letter, and I'm going to cry when I read it. It's from his own father on his 21st birthday. Friday, April 11th. Actually, his birthday was April the 26th, I think. But anyway, he was getting there early. Dear Howard, I hope that this reaches you on Monday, your 21st birthday, which by all tradition is quite an important day in your life. However, that 21st birthday will seem to you not one bit different from a number of others that have already gone by, nor any different from a number of others yet to come. But a whole lot of water has gone under the bridge since that night 21 years ago Monday, on which I first looked at that red little baby wrapped in blankets in a basket on the 3rd floor of the Natchez Sanatorium, and was very happy that he was very, apparently, normal and sound in every respect. And I can sincerely say that the happiest moments of my 49 years have been spent in the company of that same individual. I wish that we could be together for the whole of the day this coming Monday. I'm just going to pick a couple more because it does get kind of long. Okay. Dear Fairy, for this tooth, please bring me whatever you want to. Please take the tooth if you want to. Dear Howard, you did not know it, but while you were telling what you wanted in your note to me, I was right behind the head of your bed and heard everything you said. I like little children that are not greedy, and am leaving you 2 nickels and the tooth. The Fairy. This is real interesting. My father built Broadmoor Subdivision, and I came across this the other day. It's an ad for Broadmoor Subdivision, which I just think is fascinating. And I'll have that at the house too, and y'all can look at it. Come out to Broadmoor in Country Club Heights, Natchez' most exclusive development for colored 1.5 miles out Pine Ridge Road, turn right at Barlow's Grocery. Isn't that funny? Turn right at Barlow's Grocery. It's not for special appointments. And a man named Leroy Hunt was the salesman. And I tried to find out if he was still alive and invite him, but I think he's passed away. I couldn't find Leroy. Good dogs and bad cats, and bad loft and bad Jeff, and good butts. Howard Pritchard, good. And I think maybe that might be all of them, and I'll let some of y'all tell some stories, because these could just go on forever. Oh, here's one more thing, and you can probably see it. It says, come to my Christmas party at 208 Main Street Thursday, December 20 at 4 o'clock. Live music, too. Cardinal, Crutchfield, and Pritchard also request your presence. And Daddy has drawn a perfect picture of Joe Ramundi that you can instantly recognize.
Oh.
And this was a little something I found. I don't know what he drew it for, but it's brass. And it's just so good, I can't believe it. Isn't that amazing? And that's done for me. I want everybody who knows a story, please, to get up and tell it so that this library will not burn down. Thank you.
Well, that's going to be a hard act to follow, these two, because I didn't know this was going to be like this. But that was a good job, very eloquent. Probably for the first time in my life, I'll be brief. My father brought up most of my family in the Episcopal Church, and there was a parting of the ways with the church, but that does not mean to say my father was not spiritual and benevolent. And I won't go into the parting of the ways, but if I did, you understand and probably agree with me. But my father said to me many times, when I die and I'm laid out, I don't want no damn preacher giving a eulogy. For those of you who know me know I am no preacher. But I am spiritual, and he was too. He really was not what he was perceived to be. And there's a lot of wisdom, and I take with that wisdom, and there's a lot of solace in the Bible. And I think it says somewhere in there, judge not lest ye be judged. And we all do, and he did. And he did things, Christian things, more. I don't know if you people believe in karma. I'm a strong believer in karma. And that means you do benevolent things, and you reap what you sow. My father's right arm during his business career was this fine lady, Jenny Patterson, sitting next to me right here, who could handle any task with perfection that he ever threw at her. My father was an idea man. He'd come up with brilliant concepts like Broadmoor and everything, but he was like ADD. He couldn't finish it. He'd have to have Jenny there to tie the knot on the bows, and she was in the can-do business. I'll put it that way. But Jenny told me some things the other day that really I didn't know. I knew that prior to the government welfare program that Daddy had taken Joe Ramundi under his wing, and when he was about to starve to death, and basically took care of Joe his whole life. But Jenny told me the other day that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a woman at the when there was a welfare office established that would call him. Ms. Ware would call and say, Mr. Pritchard, we have an elderly black lady here, and she's had her gas cut off, and we got a cold front coming through. Is there anything you could do? And he would say, well, how much would it take to turn it back on? $100. And Daddy would have Jenny write a check. They'd never know where it came from, and he would do things like that for people. And that's what life's about. And he was, like I said, he could be judgmental, but there's another phrase in the Bible, I believe, it's called, to thine own self be true. And we need to do that in life, and I've certainly come to hopefully be true to myself and be a better person. And my father and I had somewhat of an ambivalent relationship, but I did love and admire him, and he was my true hero for as long, far back as I can remember. And I just thought that needed to be said, and I'm done. I appreciate all y'all being here. Thank you.
When I got here today and saw everybody coming and going, the first thing that came to my mind was how bad he would not want to be here if he was alive. He loved individuals, but he hated groups. And if we were out at the house and Elodie was probably saying, "All right, car's cranked, let's go," he'd probably look down towards the basement and say, "Howard, there's some Budweisers down there. Why don't you go see if there's any in the refrigerator?" But my memories, I don't have a particular one. There's plenty that I could share, a lot of mostly irreverent ones. But the ones for me are really just the inconsequential things that I'll miss. When I was a kid, we would go out almost every weekend to the house and ride four-wheelers, and almost without fail, I would get one stuck, or there was a toolbox on the back of it, and I would hit a bump and lose some of his tools in the field, and he'd find them later. The words "God damn it" ring in my head. "God damn it, Grant Howard, you little idiot," you know. And I'll never forget those weekends though. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I guess he said "God damn it" to a few of you. But I'll miss that. I'll miss going out on the river with him in the houseboat, and yesterday when I got into town. Even towards the end of his life, whenever he had calmed down a little and stopped saying "God damn it" quite as much, I got to the house out on Clifton, and I was walking around just seeing they're working on it, and there's two chairs. One of the last times I got to see him when I came in town, I would show up. Most of you know he was an animal lover, and you'll see it today when you go out to the house. There's plenty of dogs will be there to greet you. But I would show up at the house because he had a cell phone, but he didn't carry it, and so you just had to know where to find him. And if I would pull up and if I saw his truck, I'd stop and walk around, and he'd be sitting there in the back just with his cats after feeding them. And I'll miss that. I'll miss going down to the camp with him. But that's all I wanted to say, and I just appreciate everybody being here to support us today.
I have one more really funny dog story. It's got to be told because it was one of the funniest things you've ever had. When I first moved home, I didn't realize the older Daddy got, the closer to his own death, the more he cherished the lives of creatures and critters. And so he started collecting animals and dogs and cats. And so one day I'm home and Daddy comes in and he goes, "Dee!" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "There's these two dogs out here. It's pitiful. Oh my God. All the other dogs are barking at them, and they're just sitting there, and here's these two dogs, and they're just kind of sitting there going, okay, whatever, please just don't kill us." And he says, I said, "Well, look, one of them has a collar on it. Why don't you see whose dog it is?" And so he says, okay. So he takes the number down, and he calls me up. "Dave, a Mexican keeps answering the phone." I don't know. I said, "What's the address?" And it was some address on Southwind. And I said, "Well, go to the address, Daddy." And he comes back and goes, "There is nothing there. There's nothing there. There's construction going on. There's nothing there. It's not there." And I'm thinking, and I was kind of tired. I had just moved from California, and I was thinking I need to just go look myself, but I never did. And I kind of looked at Google a little bit, and then finally he said, "Well, I'm going to take this dog over and get it fixed, the female. The male's safe, So anyway, he takes this dog over to Dr. Gregg's, and that afternoon the phone rings, and Daddy says, "Hello," and Dr. Gregg says, "Mr. Pritchard, we can't find this dog's uterus anywhere." And he goes, "Oh, really? Well, okay, we'll sew her up and send her back, But he was still worried because he didn't know whose dog it was, and he said, I'm going to tie her up. And he went and he bought all these prime ribs, and he's feeding these dogs prime ribs so they'll stay there at the house. He couldn't stand it if they left. And he had that poor dog tied up for about a week. And one day he says, I think it's safe to let her go today. And I said, okay, I think that's a good idea too. So he lets her go. The next morning, hey, I'm upstairs. A tragedy has happened. And I said, what? The dogs are gone. Something horrible has happened. I just know it. And I was like, Daddy, they probably went home, wherever that is. Nope, something awful's happened. I don't know what. It's terrible. So finally I went, God damn it. And I went upstairs and looked up the address, and I drove down South, and there's the house right there. And I drive up the driveway, and there's the dog on the porch. They've got this blanket laid out on the porch for the dog, and the dog's sitting there looking all hurt. And it's like, baby, what happened? I was abducted by UFO. Why do they always do the anal probe? I woke up in a tub of ice and my kidneys were gone. We never saw that dog again. But the male dog came back and we still have him. That was 5 years ago. That's my funny dog story. I just had to tell that. Oh yeah. And then he goes, really? You found out where she lives? I said, yeah. He goes, well, do me a favor. I said, what? He goes, take this collar and just go drop it on the mailbox. I'm driving by this truck, I'm scared to death they're going to see me. I'm looking around, rolling it, and I drop it and take off. So that was that. Okay, that's the end of the story.
We all have a lot of memories of Howard, and as Brent was talking earlier, I had vivid memories of Howard out in that yard with the water hose, and I do believe I've been sprayed with that water hose before. The story I'd like to share today actually is not personal. It actually comes from my mother. They've known each other since they were little. And years ago at Margaret Martin, they were taking Latin from Margaret Martin. And there was a play that was put on, and it was in Latin. And my mother and Howard had the lead role. And at one point during the play, Howard is to pick up my mother and carry her across the stage in one of the big scenes. And during that scene, he's whispering over in her ear, I'm going to drop it, I'm going to drop it, I'm going to drop it. And she says, don't you drop me, I'm going to drop you, I'm going to drop you. And that is just typical Howard.
I'd like to say a couple words. I've known Howard for a long time. He was always my idea of a true modern Renaissance man who grabbed life with both hands all the time. And from the time I was in high school at Trinity with Howard and Elodie and Laura, and knowing Howard as a dad, and then when I came back to Natchez and joined the real estate business with my father, Paul Green, I was influenced equally by my father, Paul Green, Howard Pritchard, and George Guida, and I carry part of all three of them with me today. And one of the best stories I got on Howard is later on in life, Howard asked me if I wanted to go sleighing a pond out in Cranfield on some property that we had. I said, sure, Howard, I'd like to go sleighing a pond. I hadn't sleighing a pond in a long time. He said, come on. And so I met Howard at his house. At the time we agreed, and Melker Beltsuber, the red alligator, was there, and Howard and I hopped in Howard's Suburban, I think it was, and we headed for Cranfield. And we got out in the pond. Howard and I, Melker was overseeing the operation. And we made a pass around the pond and didn't get any fish. And we said, well, we got to go try a different pond. Let's go back to the one behind my house. And so I said, sure, Howard, let's do it. And so we went to a pond behind Howard's house, and we got into the little pond and made a big pass with the seine net, and we were just pulling it up, and there were some fish flapping, and I saw the back half of a snake tail go right by my leg. And I could feel its skin on my leg when it went by. And I said, all right, Howard, I think I've had enough of pond sailing. So he taught me a lot. Part real estate business, part pond sailing.
Mr. Pritchard. I was about 29 or 30 years old, and he loaded up a group of us and we went to Florida. And I was a driver, believe it or not, designated driver. But anyway, we were headed to a restaurant, and he was in a Suburban, and you didn't have any air conditioning in it because he couldn't afford air conditioning for the Suburban. It was hot. And he said, Greg, he said, I'm about out of gas now. Let's pull over at this next exit. And I need some gas. And I said, yes, sir. So anyway, I went on down and I passed that exit because I was trying to get to the restaurant because it was so hot up in that Suburban. And about that time it started chunking. It ran out of gas. And I thought I was big and bad back in those days. And I've never seen a man this mad in his whole life. So you think you've been cussed? He had you remember that big red gallon, like 5-gallon, 10-gallon gas tank he kept in the back of the Suburban? He got out and he calmly asked me, do you mind walking down here and get some gas? Do y'all believe that? And anyway, no, he got out and he grabbed that red gas can and chunked it out in the ditch and said, you got about 5 minutes to get back here with some gas. And he meant it. I had to go about 1.5 miles to get gas. And that was a fond memory. I thought I'd been cussed out playing football in my life, but not like Mr. Pritchard. And another memory, talking about animals, me and a buddy of mine, this wasn't but about 1.5 years ago, we were out there fishing. And he'd let you fish all day long, but you better not shoot nothing. And he meant it. We went back to the back pond, and I knew that, and Gary didn't know that. I just wasn't going to tell him. And Gary said, Mr. Pritchard, he said, man, we were back there, we killed a big old water moccasin. And I'm sitting there, well, here we go, I'm not going to be able to fish out here anymore. And he said, we put him on the bank, came back, and there was another water moccasin laying there. He said, we killed him too. We killed 2 water moccasins back here at your back pond. And he stood up and he was mad. He said, let me tell you something, those 2 snakes have more right to be here than y'all do. He said, don't you ever let me hear y'all kill nothing else on my property. And he meant it. So that's all I wanted to say.
I'm Glenn Foley, and when I think of Mr. Pritchard as a child growing up on Linton Avenue, I think back about 49 years ago when my family first moved to Linton Avenue. I remember one day strolling up the street to 214 Linton Avenue where the Pritchards lived, looking for a new friend, and I ran in the house. And from that point, we got to be good friends. I practically lived at their house. Howard and I would go ride horses and just have a lot of fun. I can remember how kind the Pritchard family was to me and taking me in as a new kid on the block. And I can remember all the kids, how they gravitated to the Pritchard house to play. It was so many fun things to do, to ride go-karts, to swing on the rope in the backyard. They had a 2-story playhouse that we played in. He had trampoline to jump on. It was just so much fun. And I can remember listening to a couple of the older kids in the neighborhood. They both loved it, or the Jordans or somebody. But they told me of this place that the Pritchard had down on the river just north of town called the farm. And I can remember being invited to go to the farm for the first time. And I hauled ass down to my house to ask my parents if I could go. I was so excited. And I came back up to the Pritchard's house, and we climbed into the old International Scout they had and headed out Cemetery Road to the farm. And yeah, I guess it took about half an hour to get there. When we got there, the horses kind of followed us in from the field. The barn was behind the house. And Howard got out, and Elodie and Laura and I, and Mr. Pritchard and Miss Pritchard, and me being a city slicker, everybody wanted to ride horses, so I'd never ridden horses before. But Mr. Pritchard and Howard was kind enough to show me how to put the saddle and the bridle on, and we did a lot of riding down there, and that kind of hooked me on the farm. And I remember all the times that Howard and his dad, and we'd go down and he'd teach us how to shoot pistols and rifles, and I can think of the times when Howard would take me down in the basement of their house, and he had all these war trophies that he'd brought back from Europe, and it was German uniforms and helmets and Nazi flags and bayonets, and they had a gun cabinet with all kind of rifles and pistols that he'd brought back, and it was just so many good times, and I just want to thank Howard and Elodie and Laura for letting me tag along and enjoy all those good times.
It was our pleasure.
My mother was married to Howard. That was her third husband, and I believe she was his third wife. if I got it right. The second one was real brief. And there was a little jealousy going on there. And so the mama left, went to Texas. Anyway, she came right on back. And I believe that she loved him more than any of the others. And I believe he loved her. No, I know he loved her. I know both of them loved each other very much. And it gave me a lot of joy to see her happy with him. And I'm his stepson. But he treated me like a son. And that's enough, I think. You know, I had a lot of fun with him too. They would get, mother and him would get into arguments about every day. And it just so happened that Howard and I kind of see things the same way, and I would say, well, I agree with him. She's like, I can't believe you're taking sides over your own blood. And I said, Mom, I'm not taking sides. It's just that we just happen to agree. And anyway, he was my friend, and I'm gonna miss him. And, I loved him.
My name's Camille Berkeley, and I grew up next door to the Pritchards on Linton Avenue. God, I didn't know I'd be so nervous talking in front of people. But when I go outside of Mississippi, talk to people about my childhood, I realize how blessed my childhood truly was. Our parents let us do things that were dangerous. We could leave the house early in the morning and not be home until the street lights were on. You know, we didn't have to come home for lunch. You didn't have a cell phone. No one knew where you were. We were usually making forts on the bluff somewhere and doing a lot of dangerous things. But what I remember about Howard is that he appreciated that and let children grow up and learn on their own terms. And I like that. And we did spend a lot of time at the Pritchard house, and Howard had a beautiful workshop in the back that had all these cool rafters and beams, and we would climb all over them. And we lived next door, and we used to have parties in our basement at Linton Avenue. I remember one time we were shucking oysters one night, and Howard started speaking in Chinese. I didn't know he knew Chinese, but what was really impressive is he could keep it up for about 10 minutes. And we would have so much fun every weekend. We would take both of our own boats out and go up the river and just find stuff to do. We'd seine a pond. Let's say the river came down and the water would be really high up on a sandbar. After seining it, we'd start digging in the sand until the water started overflowing, and you could sit there and it would just shovel you down to the river. And we were always having fish fries. And when we did things from that neighborhood, we practically took every kid from the street to go and do things. So it was really a great community feeling, and I loved it. And to this day, I tell my friends about my childhood, and they're like, wow, they're really impressed because they did not grow up that way. And I feel very blessed, and I feel blessed to have known the Pritchard family so well. Thank you.
Everything Camille just said. Growing up on Linton Avenue was the best part of my childhood. There were 3 men that helped make me the man I am today. And that's Big Chandler, Dr. Killer, and Big Howard. It was just great role models. I will tell you, as I can't repeat, as far as Camille, she hit it. It was just, the farm, the river, the workshop. I mean, everything. Yeah, it was all there. The basement. I mean, I did it all too. I will say, a few years back, my wife and I came up to Natchez to meet Lauren Terry at the house, and Christy had never met Big Howard. And she was worried that she would have to make a good impression. And I married my wife for her intelligence and her good looks. But I told her, I said, babe, you're a very attractive girl. Don't worry about it. And absolutely, Big Howard hardly talked to me at all. He spent his whole time talking to Christy. But I love all the Pritchards, and I appreciate it. Couldn't have been a better childhood when we moved to Linton. So.
Howard was a joker. He owned me and Joe Ramundi for 30 years. During that time, we never had a crossword. But such things as taking a Coca-Cola out of the Coke machine and putting iced tea in it so that Mr. Jeff came and dropped his money in for a Coca-Cola at lunchtime, it was tea. And he would taste it. He said, they don't make Coca-Cola. I was in on a lot of those seining the ponds, and one day George Guido and Howard and I had gone over to Vidalia. We had a subdivision over there, Concordia Park. And behind that we had a sewage lagoon that took care of it. So there is a Vidalia ditch, the main ditch that comes out of Vidalia, and for some reason we stopped by there and it was full of crawfish. So Howard tells me, he said, Jenny, get out in the ditch and throw the crawfish up to me and George, and we'll take them to the office and cook them. I rolled my britches up. Now this was in the first part of February. What I didn't know was that crawfish, when they have their little ones, they attach themselves to the tail, and they stay there till they get big enough to take care of themselves. Well, I threw all these crawfish up there, and the little babies, I just waked them off. we got back to the office, and Carson Cardinal had an office with us. Bob Foley, just all kind of good friends. Dickie Prescott. Anyway, we cooked up all these crawfish, and after they cooked, there was just a little piece like this big in the tail. Because the baby said that's how food. So we came in, we called Carson. Carson was a good cook, and he loved to eat too. And we said, we got crawfish, come on, we're all gonna eat. So he ate 4 or 5 of them, and he said, you know, these crawfish look kind of funny, they're kind of greenish looking. And Howard said, well, I guess so, we got them out of the Vidalia sewage. About 10 minutes later, we heard something. Carson was sick. I know numerous stories like this. We worked hard and we played hard. And I loved Howard. He was good to me for 30 years.
That was true, I was there.
Oh, I have a dog story too. About 9 o'clock one night, Howard pulled up at my house and he said, Jenny, I got some dogs here I want to put in your pen. Somebody is starving these dogs to death. I'm not going to call any names, but he was a supervisor and lived out on Pine Ridge Road. It's a big farm. And these dogs had come to the farm down on the river. And if you're around a hunting dog, they have to be, they're not fat, because you have to keep it in shape where they can run. So I said, Howard, I can't put those dogs in my pen. I don't know who they belong to. And he said, oh, I don't know who they belong to either. I threw the collars in the river. So a day or two later, I was there late one afternoon coming in from work, and these people drove up and they said, do you happen to have some stray dogs? And I said, I sure do. They said, well, they belong to me. That was my dog story.
My name is Cameron Lovett, and all my friends know me as Bo, and I'm part of the Linton Avenue gang. We lived at 218, and I've known Big Howard since I was 3 years old. He was always Big Howard. He wasn't Mr. Pritchard, he was Big Howard. And he was a guy that was unlike my father. My father was a beautiful tennis player and an excellent golfer, and that's what we did. But Big Howard, when I would go down there, he'd build a boat with his hands and go put it in the river. And yeah, I just thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And he was quick-witted and would rip you to shreds, but I always knew he loved me, and he just showed me. And he took me everywhere. Between Big Howard and Mr. Stanley Berkeley and Chandler Jordan, I was able to do things that my father didn't like to do, and it meant the world to me. And one time, I was a real little guy. I decided I was going to have to pay Big Howard back for his generosity. So Little Howard and I, we noticed the back steps needed painting. It was a big, long staircase that went 2 stories up. So we got a big old wheelbarrow and filled it full of dirt and filled it full of water till it was about the viscosity of silicone with super glue mixed in it. And we took shovels and we coated that whole staircase from top to bottom. And when we stood there and waited for him to come home, and we got home, we were so proud, and I was standing there, just couldn't wait to hear what he had to say. And he said it to me so many times I can hear it right now. Go home, Bo.
Hello. My name is Jack Kelly. I didn't think I'd do this, but I think I should. I moved here about 16 years ago and very shortly joined the Gaelic Club thing, and I think that's where I met Howard. But I was being squired by George Armstrong, and we went under the Hill Saloon one night. This is a good story. And there was nobody there but Howard Pritchard, me and George Armstrong, and another man who I didn't know. And we were, he said, you're the little Irish lady. And we just got to rapping and talking, and suddenly George was called outside for a phone call. This is before cell phones, and I think there was an outside payphone, wasn't there, right? And he came over to me and he said, George is too old for you. You need somebody young like me. Now, I've done a little bit of the math because I saw how old he was in the obituary, so I think he was 71 or 72. George was, that doesn't matter. This is what matters. He wrote his phone number down on a piece of paper and gave it to me and said, you call me. And George came back in, and that was, you know, pretty much the end of the evening. Now, I kept that little piece of paper because I thought he was pretty darn cute. And I really kind of had a crush on him. And that's an intrigue, you know, you understand about an intrigue. Years later, 4 or 5 maybe, I got to be friends with this guy named Calvin, and he said, I got to tell you a story. You and George Armstrong were under the hill. And Howard Pritchard told me to go outside and call George Armstrong. I loved that. That was about, and I loved him, and I glad I got to know him. And I don't know if I told Elodie that story before or not, but and we always, it sparked something because every time we saw each other, it was just kind of cute. Thank you.
One last thing. Joe and Bunny got a color TV before we did. I remember that. And
Everyone had one before we.
yeah, that's true. Everybody did. I forgot the other thing I was going to say. When I broke my neck in 1980, I was up at the hospital with Jackson ICU, and they would let Mom and Daddy in for a while. Finally, they sublet an apartment. And it's a horrible story.
Oh, no, don't tell it.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, in addition to loving dogs, he also loved cats. And we all of our dogs were strays, so they were all hunting dogs. And if a cat got out of the house, it was a dead cat. So we had to keep the cats inside. So we had litter boxes, lots and lots of litter boxes. And Daddy hated that litter that's scoopable. I liked the scoopable litter, you know, and he'd say, damn it, Dee, it's got these huge clots in it. You can't get them out, and it's horrible, and it's just, you know, and I said, Daddy, the reason your room smells so bad is because the only thing you're scooping is the poop. You're not scooping any of the pee out, you know, and he's like, well, I want you to quit using it. And what we would do is I would get that scoopable stuff, it would come in a big plastic bucket, that had a top on it. And I would keep the bucket so that I would go and I would scoop the box every day and put it in the bucket and put the top on the bucket so I didn't have to, you know, run a big house. And then we'd take them out, and there's this ravine behind the house, and we'd walk over with the cat buckets, we'd throw it out in the ravine. And one day, Daddy, he called me from home. I was at work, and he says, you have got to quit using that litter. I said, why? He says, that stuff, it doesn't deteriorate, it stays the same. And I was out there and I fell down that ravine. And I kept slipping and sliding. And I was trying to crawl back up. And he had that stuff all over him. It was the most horrible thing, and I couldn't help but laugh. He didn't think it was that funny. Oh, and then one other funny story I have about Daddy is I could always, I worried about him because he was old. And he had a routine, and I always knew where he was. And I knew if I called at 6 o'clock, he'd be at home, feeding the deer. And every once in a while, I would call and he wouldn't be there. And it would scare me. I remember I called Brent one time in tears. I was in Marksville. I said, "You gotta get my dad's dad. I know it, And so, anyway, I was down in Covington visiting my mother, and Daddy liked to go to the corner bar. And I'd been trying to call Daddy, and I couldn't find him. So I said, well, I'm going to call the corner, see if he's there. And I had gotten to where I called the corner so often that he would tell him, "Tell her I'm not here." So anyway, I get on my phone. I didn't have the number, so I dialed 411. And the operator goes, "City and listing, please." I said, "Natchez, Mississippi. Can you please give me the number for the corner on Canal Street?" "Hold for the number, please." So I get the number, and I call, and the woman says, "Corner." And I said, "Hey, is Howard Pritchard down there?" And she said, "No, ma'am." And I said, "Well, are you expecting him?" And she said, "Ma'am, this is the answering service." And all of a sudden I realized I had called the coroner. And I started laughing. And I could hear the phone beeping, and it was him because I'd been trying to find him. And I answered the phone. I couldn't talk. I was laughing so hard. I was like, "You won't believe who I just called." He didn't think it was funny at all. Anyway, that's my coroner story.
Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He keeps on rolling, he just keeps rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, but him that plants them are soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweats and strain, body all licking and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bell, get a little drunk, and you land in jail. Eyes get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along.
Folks, thank you so much. Elodie, you want to come up? No?
Go ahead.
Thanks, everybody. It really turned out, I think, as well as the family could have ever hoped, thanks to everyone who was involved.